We are back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us. We're also streaming live on Facebook at newschannel5.com. Number on the screen here on the plus, 737-7587. Call us or message me, and I'll share the question with News Channel 5 legal analyst Nick Leonardo, who is joining us from his home office with the Christmas tree behind him. Looking good, my friend. And hey, listen, a couple other cases I want to hit on. This was interesting. You and I know that we covered the Holly Bobo case gavel to gavel, and we know Zach Adams was convicted largely on the strength of Jason Autry's testimony, who was a co-suspect with him. Now, Autry and we all knew was going to get a plea deal, and he did. He was finally released after serving less than 8 years in September, all right? Now, there's still a pending appeal out there, and a lot of people think if the judge, as you do, may be ordered to redo some of this case, Autry may have to come back and play. Well, last week, and I don't know if this surprised a lot of people considering his background, Autry, just a few weeks after finally getting out of prison, is arrested again on gun and drug charges. And likely, if convicted of both state and federal charges, could be looking at another 20 years behind bars based on these charges. Just your thoughts on that with regard to Autry. Again, these charges completely separate. He's free and clear on the Bobo case. But what if he's needed to testify again in the Bobo case if there's some type of an appeal?
Well,
looks like it just froze up there. Let's see if we can get that signal back up. Mary Elena will try to reconnect him. It's funny. You know what? Have you ever noticed that it's called Murphy's Law as she seeks to get Nick reattached? He's sitting there alive. I'm rambling on, asking him a question. And the moment I give him the question, it freezes up, and now he's back. All right, Nick, what do you think? First of all, I know you and I aren't real surprised that Autry's back behind bars because he's a bad, bad dude. But does this impact the big picture on the Bobo case if it comes up again, and the fact that he's locked up again now on other crimes, hurting his credibility further?
You know, I don't think so. I mean, as you said at the beginning of this question, he's a bad, bad dude. And I think that listening to his testimony, you know, it doesn't get any badder than that. Okay. I mean, if you remember, Nick, it was kind of eerie. I mean, it was, and it was so detailed. You thought, gosh, you can't be making this up. And what kind of human being would engage in this kind of behavior? So the fact that he got new charges for drugs or guns, I don't think that matters because he's a bad guy. Now, the state doesn't always like where they get their witnesses from, okay? And a lot of times they are from the criminal environment. But again, when I saw that, I couldn't believe it. I shook my head, but I thought, it's not going to hurt the state's case because it's not like they're tarnishing an incredible witness. I mean, this guy, he's not a good person. Yeah. I mean, you heard the testimony. It was horrible.
It was. I mean, he basically admitted that he was there with Zach, that Holly Bobo was still kind of alive at one point, and that he said, Zach, she's moving. Look, I'll go to the end of the driveway and be lookout. And then Zach, according to him, came back and shot him. So he was right there with him. You know what some people are saying, Nick? This is karma for Autry. I mean, apparently the prosecution had to dance with the devil to get some type of conviction. So they had to take Autry's testimony to get at least someone convicted, as opposed to maybe having none convicted. And so Autry, who was just, in the opinion of many, including me, just as guilty as Adams in this, walks after barely serving 7 years, all right? Now with this, it's karma, man. He could be looking at 2 decades behind bars, and a lot of people are like, good.
Well, and it's important to look at this, too. And under 1324, the statute number, there's a crooks with gun law here in Tennessee that, especially when it's involving drugs, if there's mandatory jail time associated with this, then you take that mandatory jail time and his prior offenses, and you're right, he's looking at a lot of jail time. But I have a sneaking suspicion that they may cut him a break. I mean, a break as in maybe they continue this case on down the road. I mean, he's on parole. That should be revoked. But pay close attention to the resolution of the charges, and that will let you know whether the state believes that they're going to need him again.
That's interesting. All right, and let's just get back to this. We know that the appellate court now has the appeal that's been filed by Zach Adams' attorney. And if you would just quickly revisit, you talked about this and we discussed it after the verdict came down. I mean, a lot of people truly believe that Zach Adams was involved. I think, the evidence was there. But even so, you felt that there were mistakes made during trial. And we've seen mistakes all the time in cases over the years that you and I have done, but they're not big enough to require overturning a verdict or calling for a new trial. You felt there might be something to that level in this case, and I've talked to other attorneys who agree with you. Revisit that for us.
Yeah, so, the judge, Creed McKinley, is a great trial judge, by the way. And I think he did a great job in that case. But it's important to remember that those judges outside of jurisdictions like Nashville, So today he's hearing a death penalty case. Tomorrow he may be hearing a divorce. And so these judges kind of hear everything, and they ride circuit in certain counties. And so the trial judge's role is a gatekeeper of evidence to make sure that the jury doesn't hear something that they shouldn't hear or that would be inappropriate. And so there was a lot of evidence, I think, that came in that was highly prejudicial, that maybe should not have come in. And obviously the defense is going to argue that, prejudice the jury. And I think that some of these, like prior bad acts of certain people or certain conversations that shouldn't have been let in, I think it would be above harmless error. And so if the Court of Criminal Appeals finds that, then they're going to remand this case back for a new trial. And then at that point in time, he's presumed innocent. All of these individuals are presumed innocent. It becomes a pending case again. They would be entitled to bond. I mean, the reality is they're not going to get a bond. It's a capital case. But I think there's a strong possibility that this case could be tried again, just because of some of the things that were said in trial that really had no business being said.
All right, and let's be real clear on this. Everyone convicted in a case like this always appeals. And in my experience anyway, the appellate court, I'm not going to say is loath to grant an appeal, but typically they almost never go anywhere. It's pretty darn rare that they call on a case this big a new trial. It happens, but it's rare. So you would agree with me on that? And so what you're telling me here, though, is there are mistakes you think that get to the level where you honestly think they may do this? Because I think that's standard for a new trial. There can be mistakes, and it's still not going to reach that standard. They can say, yeah, okay, there are a few here, but it's pretty obvious this guy did it. But, I mean, this one you think is high enough?
I don't have my notes from the trial in front of me, and it was a few years back.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's there. You're exactly right. Every single trial has errors. And so the higher court has to determine, is that a harmless error, or is that something that is really beyond harmless, that is a serious error that prejudiced this jury? And I remember it was maybe a TBI officer who who no longer worked for the TBI, but it did at the time, and then starts getting into these conversations as to whether or not somebody was actually innocent, or whether he believed somebody else actually committed the crime. And a lot of times I remember him getting into a lot of that conversation before the judge said, well, that's inappropriate. Now, the trial judge has the ability to give what's called a curative instruction to say, now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm telling you to disregard what you just heard. It's impossible to unring those bells.
Yeah. Wasn't it? There was one that I still remember that you kind of sat up straight and said, did he just allow that? Remember there was this individual that did some investigating on his own and went to where Zach Adams lived and knocked on the door, and he talked about how when he looked in, he saw a bunch of marijuana in there. Do you remember that part of it? And that he shared that. It's kind of like all of a sudden now that taints Adams, and the jury just heard this, that he's got a bunch of drugs in his house.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, those are the kind of things that, that could have very well tainted the jury, that should not have come in. And again, it's important to remember that the trial judge, in this case, Judge McKinley, he doesn't know what's coming.
Right.
Okay, he's trying to anticipate that as a judge, but they're sitting up there for 2 weeks in a case that is a really, kind of a whodunit, and they still, for the longest time, didn't even have a body. And you had a district attorney, Matt Stowe, who was at odds with the TBI for a period of time, after he got elected, which almost suggested that somehow he was involved in the timing of the finding of the skull so that he could get elected. And so you see just such a problem here, and there's just so much evidence from both sides trying to come in that it's hard to stay on top of all of it. And I think the judge did as best as the judge could do, but this is not your average case.
I'll tell you, we got to go a break, but I'm with you on that. And if this... Look, I want justice however it goes, but I'm hoping this doesn't happen. Mainly because if he calls for a new trial, it's going to be a mess. And again, in any time this happens, my thoughts go to the family of the victim, okay?
Well,
and having to go through
something. I think they would just plead guilty again. I think they would plead guilty again with no death penalty. I can't imagine them going through another trial.
Yeah. Let's take a quick call from Reverend Enoch Fuzz is joining us. Reverend Fuzz, good morning, sir.
Hey, Nick.
Hey, you sound well.
Good morning, Nick and Nick.
Good morning.
Those are two good people to me. I was Christmas shopping last week at Walgreens. Who's Christmas shopping Walgreens? But I saw a high-profile judge. I'm going to ask you, what happened to that case? I saw Monty Watkins. I saw Judge Monty Watkins at Walgreens getting pictures of his granddaughter. And I was with my friend, and I said, that's the judge who did the Vanderbilt case. Whatever happened to that case, Nick and Nick?
Okay,
That's my
well,
question.
the Vanderbilt
Merry
rape
Christmas.
case. Okay, Merry Christmas to you. It's interesting that he brought that up when we were talking about a new trial. It was not because of an appellate court, but you'll recall in the Vanderbilt rape case, sadly, there was one of the jurors who was not completely upfront during the selection process, who actually was a crime victim himself and got onto the jury, and they didn't know about it. And because of that, they had to retry Vandenberg and the others again, which had to be awful for the poor victim who had to testify again. But recall that, don't you, Nick? And that circumstance. Talk about a mess when it came back. They were guilty. That video nailed them, but they had to do the trial all over again because of that one juror.
Yeah, that's what you have to worry about in the Delkey Hamburg case. Somebody wanting to get on this jury because they have an axe to grind one way or the other. And that was really odd that foreperson was so out front about this. But that case was retried and they're convicted, and then all of them are in the penitentiary right now. But it's great to hear from Pastor Fuzz.
Sure.
And most importantly, I just want to say that I can't think of another human being in Nashville that preaches more inclusivity and that loves everyone. And so our city loves Pastor Fuzz. I personally love him, and I think we need more people like him because he walks the walk and talks the talk.
Yep, I echo that completely. He's a friend that goes back to the years with me and was good friends with the great Larry Britton. Reverend Fuzz, as many of you know, is battling cancer. He's a serious case of cancer, and he's been fighting it and has an amazing attitude about it, has gotten great medical care and a lot of love and people praying for him. And you should do that for Reverend Fuzz for the holidays. We wish him the best, and he sounded good there, and I certainly hope he continues to get better. I really do. It's great hearing from him. I'm so glad he called. You take care, and happy holidays. Hopefully we'll talk and see each other soon, Reverend Fuzz. We'll take a break. Be back with our final segment with Nick Leonardo right after this.